Okay, I need to talk to you about this phone because Oppo just dropped something, well, that might actually give the iPhone a run for its money. And this is something we need to talk about. This is the Oppo Find X9 Ultra. It just dropped globally and it's launching globally, and the camera specs on this thing are kind of insane. Now, I'm an Apple guy, you guys know that, but when I see it, I give my thoughts and opinions on how it is, what Oppo is doing here. This is something that we need to talk about. And stick around because halfway through the video, I'm going to tell you something that genuinely surprised me, and it is something that you might not expect. So first, a little context. Oppo has been making Ultra phones for a few years now, but they were China only. The Find X8 Ultra last year, the reviewers called it one of the best camera phones of 2025, but most of us couldn't even buy it. This year, Oppo has changed that. The Find X9 Ultra is going global, and the timing is interesting. It's coming out right before whatever Apple has cooking for the fall. But first, I want to get into what you're here for and what we promised here at the beginning of the video, and that is the cameras. And Oppo really has stepped up their game. They got 3 cameras this year, but there's one feature in one of the cameras that will probably surprise you because it surprised me. So let's dive into that. The camera setup on this phone is the Hasselblad tuned. And if you don't know Hasselblad, they're a Swedish luxury camera brand company. Think professional photographer, film shots. They're the real deal when it comes to photography, cinematic photography, and all that stuff. And we're talking massive sensor, periscope zoom, and computational photography that competes phones twice its price in other markets. So what this means is that there's 3 cameras. You got the main 50 megapixel camera, you got the ultra wide 50 megapixel camera, and a 200 megapixel Hasselblad camera. And this is where it gets kind of insane. They are saying you can get up to 120x zoom. Now for reference, Samsung had a phone that did 100x zoom, which was pretty insane. Now, a lot of that is digital crop, which means the sensor can go in, say, 5, 10x, and then anything past that is just zooming in on the photo, basically. But they're saying up to 120x, and on their website, it shows a 13x zoom that looks pretty insane. And so I'm curious to see what this looks like once it's actually out in the market, because sometimes companies will say something, but we'll see how they deliver, because nowadays with AI, they promise something and it's just not there yet. So we need to see it in person. But this 200 megapixel camera is quite insane. They have their new technology when it comes to it. And with this 200 megapixel camera, this will help get in a lot more light and detail, especially when you have a lot of light in the photo. But also this should help hypothetically give the phone better low light pictures. Now, I did make a video on if sensors actually matter a couple weeks ago, so make sure you go check that out. But sometimes big sensors can hurt the phone, but sometimes they can help the phone. So having a 200 megapixel camera, we'll see how this turns out. With the partnership with Hasselblad, we'll see how this goes, because they are known for their awesome sensors. So putting this into an iPhone or a phone will be interesting. So we'll have to try and get our hands on one and test this out in person. Now, this is also nice for people who love Hasselblad cameras. They're usually $5,000 to $50,000 for their camera. And so obviously with it being a smartphone and how condensed the cameras are, you're not going to be getting the $50,000 price range quality, but you're definitely going to be getting a pretty good picture for what you're spending. These phones should be launching end of April. They say April 21st. And they should be launching globally, which will be cool to bring that Oppo market into the US and other countries as well. This is actually kind of insane. So on a normal phone, you have a battery, a lithium ion battery, and you usually get about 5,000. Some phones are now pushing 6,000. And that's great. The iPhone's around 5,000 milliamp hours. I get all day battery life, sometimes even a day and a half on light use. And Oppo decided to do a 7,500 milliamp hour silicon carbon battery. So that just means this battery is going to cook. It's going to be awesome, and it's going to last you all day. The only issues we've seen so far is Silicon carbon batteries after a couple years could degrade a little bit faster than your regular batteries. So in terms of longevity, we are not 100% sure on how this will compare against a regular lithium ion battery. But on paper, the specs are pretty insane and should last a while. That being said, this battery is about 50-ish percent bigger than the iPhone 17 Pro or Pro Max. So this is a big camera and you're gonna get a lot of battery life. This is something you are not going to worry about. And so this is one thing that kind of throws a little punch in the gut to Apple, is chucking a massive battery, but the phone is still the same size. So when it comes to battery, wireless charging is a 50 watt and regular charging is up to 100 watt charging, which is pretty fast. And fast charging nowadays is hopefully something that's a little bit more standard. It's been around for a little bit now, so that's something we do like to see. Display is 6.8 inches, 144 hertz refresh rate. It's got the SD8 Gen Elite 5 chip in it, and it rocks around 16 gigs of RAM and about 152 gigs of storage, and that storage is upgradable. This is IP68 rated as well, water and dust resistant, so you won't really have to worry there about getting your phone wet. You can drop in a pool and you should be fine. So when it comes to comparison to the iPhone, the display, the brightness, the battery, the charging, and the zoom, because the iPhone's Pros can only go to 40x zoom, this phone beats it in all those categories on paper. So in that aspect, Apple has lost, but there's always phones that outcompete the iPhone. We know Samsung's had better zoom. They've had decent battery life. There's other phones that come out and will have like some sort of crazy specs. But the difference when it comes from, let's say, an Oppo phone and an iPhone is the ecosystem. For someone who has been in the ecosystem, they have AirPods, they have an Apple Watch, they have the MacBook. All right, they're kind of deep into it. So now we're looking at this wall that keeps getting bigger and bigger as they keep buying more stuff. Maybe they have the Apple subscription that gives them more iCloud storage, or Apple Music. It just keeps growing higher and higher. So when someone who has an iPhone is in this ecosystem, they see this phone, it's got better battery, it's got better screens, it's got a better camera potentially. They're like, well, I have my MacBook, I have my AirPods, and I have my phone. They all work together way better than if I had them all separately with different companies. Why would I switch? And that has kind of been the issue with Apple users getting out of the ecosystem. Not that it's a bad thing, because it makes it super nice for an Apple user. They even got the green bubbles, but this is where it gets hard when you have these, phones from China, kind of get into the US market. It makes it hard for them to get in because, well, Apple owns 50% of the market share in the United States. So when you have over half the people using an iPhone compared to, Samsung, Google, just to name a few, or the other 50%, and other phones, you got, OnePlus and other phones, it makes it hard to infiltrate this market. But when you make a good enough phone, you can hopefully get your market share higher. So I'm curious to see how this will launch in the United States. And, Oppo has very much so copied Apple. If you look at their website, even their operating system, ColorOS, is basically iOS with an Android touch. So we'll have to make a video on that. But let me know your thoughts on the Oppo Find X9 Pro if you like it, because I don't know, we'll see. This is just the thoughts and impressions, but I'm curious to see how this actually goes when it launches April 21st and how the US market will react to it. Will they buy it? Will they not? Let me know down below. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.